As I mentioned, my name is Mary Hildinger. I have been a software consultant for DWD Technology a little over 26 years now. And with me, I have David Overholt. And David has been a Sage 100 guru for quite some time. He's a project manager, and he's also one of our master developers. David, do you want to say hi?
Hi, and welcome everybody.
So I'm sure many of you have spoken with either David or me, and we'll be happy to answer questions as we can here for today. You've got our email addresses here on the slide. If you need a copy of the presentation and you did not receive one via email when you got your invitation, there is a handouts section in the panel or in your control panel, and you are welcome to download those handouts directly. There we go. If any of you need CPE credit, you are welcome to email Leah Peters. Her email address is lpeters@dwdtechgroup.com. Let her know if you attended the first session or the second part will be payroll specific. Let her know if you've attended both parts and just request CPE credit for the Sage 100 webinar. So today, just a rundown of what we're going to cover in this first part of the sessions. Obviously, we've granted you welcome, and we are so happy you are all here. I want to talk a little bit about DWD and who we are, especially for those of you who may not have a lot of familiarity with us. We're going to talk about some things important to note as far as Sage 100 and versions and staying up to date. We'll talk a little bit about the closing of modules and the order in which we typically want to close those, especially at year end, but it's also applicable at month end as well. We'll spend some time talking about AP, AR, and GL processing at year end, and then I'll dabble a little bit with inventory as well, because I know a number of you out there also use inventory. And then we'll have some time for questions. We'll take a little break, and then we will move on to the payroll portion. If anybody is not interested in sticking around, you are welcome to bow out. We are recording this session, and we will be sending a copy of the recording to you after we get that all buttoned up. So it'll probably be later this week or early next week when we have that ready for everyone. Who are we? DWD Technology Group. We are a technology group that is a division of a CPA firm here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Our technology division was established back in 1990, and we've been running strong ever since. We have 3 office locations. Our primary office is in Fort Wayne. We have an accounting office in Marion, Indiana, and we have a software office in Indianapolis. Just because we are located in central and northeast Indiana, that does not mean that we cannot facilitate assisting you. I recognize a few folks really from all over the country. So we are glad you're here, and we are glad to be able to assist you in any way that we can. Of our full accounting firm, there's approximately 60 to maybe 65 individuals running everything from office support all the way up through full-blown accountants, and our technology division, which is comprised of software and hardware consultants. I believe all, or if not all, most of our hardware consultants are Microsoft certified. So we have a lot of the education that substantiates the service that we can provide for you. We offer software and business consulting from the technology group, and our area of expertise revolves predominantly around manufacturing, distribution, and core accounting functionality. What software solutions does DWD offer? We have a lot of link with Sage software, and some of you I know who are here today for the first time have come off other Sage platforms. We work with Sage 100. We also work with Sage Intacct, and Sage Intacct is a true cloud-based application that we are finding folks really being happy to be able to get to because of the accessibility really wherever you are. We also work with Sage BusinessWorks, Sage 50, which used to be known as Peachtree. We deal with MIP Fund Accounting, which is a not-for-profit software. We have experience with Sage Fixed Assets, Sage HRMS, which is a human resource management software, and we also work with Sage CRM, which is a contact resource management software. I have exposure to Sage 100, Sage BusinessWorks, Sage 50, and Sage Fixed Assets. David is predominantly Sage 100, and we've got some other folks that work with the other software platforms. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. We can certainly find the right person with whom you can talk. What do we provide from the software side? We do training and support and setup. We do upgrades. We do customizations. David, as I mentioned, is a master developer, which means he can get into the Sage 100 code and he can actually rewrite it. We also have some other gentlemen who can help with integration of third-party applications, and they can do some background programming. We do a lot of custom report writing for Crystal reports. We certainly can help you with data conversion, especially if you're migrating from one platform to another. We have experience with systems integration, and for our manufacturing friends, we do a lot with barcode systems. And I'm going to say manufacturing and distribution because sometimes that's important on that side of the house as well. We offer services that help with your business intelligence. We work with Power BI and Sage Alerts and Workflows, which are some tools that can read right into your Sage 100 data and either get you desktop views of what's going on or provide you with alerts to let you know when certain conditions have been met. We certainly can help out with manufacturing efficiencies. There are some third-party applications that can facilitate that. We've got tools that allow us to integrate with work order scanning solutions, work order efficiency solutions, warehouse automation. We also work with integrating with websites, and then of course Sage CRM. So if you've got salespeople that are out in the field, they can access some information of Sage 100 directly through the Sage CRM solution, which is a cloud-based solution. Let's talk about some things that we need to be aware of. Back in the day, I worked for an aircraft manufacturer, and it was a government or a military aircraft manufacturer, and they were really big on TLAs, or three-letter acronyms. So a couple of the acronyms that pop up, especially this time of year, and for those of you who've been around for a while, IRD, Interim Release Download. What is contained within this particular program add-on is that it's year-end program changes predominantly for accounts payable. And it also contains some of the program changes that are required for your e-filing and reporting. So if you're processing your 1099s from Sage 100, we need to get this installed with you. One of the TLAs that's no longer around is this bad boy called a tax table update. Prior to the conversion of payroll to what we call the new business framework, we had to get those tax table updates applied. Those would have your tax rates and things like that that would be installed and updated. Because of the change to the new business framework, we no longer have to install a tax table update. Your payroll updates will take care of those tax table changes. And if those of you who are really used to using the payroll, you've noticed that you will frequently get prompted, hey, there's a tax table update that's out there. you want to go ahead and get that installed. As a point of note, tax table updates no longer available for Sage 100, and if you want to install the recent or the latest IRD updates, you must be on Sage 100 2020 or newer. So for those of you folks that have not upgraded for a while, we probably need to look at that and make sure that you are in a position to take advantage of all of the functionality that is available. Do I need to install the IRD? Basically, the answer is yes, if you're going to be doing your 1099 processing. And what versions? If you are on Sage 2022, which is the most current version, that is an acceptable version to download and install the IRD. Sage 2021, you will notice that there are some framing of the specific release versions. That's what the .3 to .5 is. Sage 100 2020, you need to be on at least version 2020.5. So if you don't have that version installed, we need to get the service pack on to get you to that minimum version, and then we can get the IRD installed. I do not have word yet that the IRD has been released yet. It should be coming within the next week. If you have any extended solutions or third-party applications or any custom program modifications, please check with your reseller if it is not DWD, or check with us and let us help you make sure that the IRD will not blow away any of those extended solutions or program modifications. Sage 100, what versions of software are still supported? Sage's theory these days is to support the current version and 2 prior versions. So that means Sage 100 2022 is the current version, and formally Sage will support version 2021 and version 2020. If you are on an older version than that, you probably will not be able to reach out to Sage to get support. DWD will be happy to attempt to support you, but if we run into an issue that we can't resolve, we can't get help from Sage because they'll just tell us, hey, y'all need to upgrade. And you'll notice some end of support dates. So the theory behind all that is that the retirement date of a version is going to be the release date of the said version plus 2, basically. So when 2025 releases, then Sage 100 version 2022 will no longer be supported by Sage. From a payroll perspective, for those of you running payroll, you will need to ensure that you are on the current version of payroll, which is 2.23.0. And David, I don't remember. I think that's out already. So that may have happened prior to me working on these slides. And if not, it should be out within the next couple of days.
Yes, it's due out, I think maybe today, but.
Okay, thank you. As far as the tax table updates, that is all maintained in Sage's cloud. And instead of having to pull those updates, Sage actually pushes them to you, which is really, really nice, because that way you don't have to get everybody kicked out to install the update. Anybody who's got the rights to install that will get the prompt, and it gets installed, and you are ready to go with the current information. I'll talk more about the payroll in the latter half of today's session. So what are we going to do? It's the end of the year, or maybe even just the end of a month, and the typical thing is that we close modules. Well, how do I know which modules to close first? Depending on how your desktop view of Sage is laid out, you've either got your modules alphabetized, or you've got them in the standard order that Sage originally presented them. just because that's the order that they've been presented isn't necessarily the best order in which to close those modules. So Sage uses a hierarchy, and it looks at all of the things that potentially feed into other modules, and it recommends the farthest things out get closed first, and then we finally close the general ledger as our final module to close. So for those of you using bill of material or work order, or it may be called production management now, those modules will get closed first. If you are using the barcode module that is embedded within Sage, that would get closed. Then we roll into purchase order, sales order, inventory, because of course those latter two modules feed into inventory. If you are using the material requirements planning or the inventory requirements planning, depending on which version, it's called something slightly different. Time card is part of payroll now, so that would actually close with the payroll module. And note, payroll gets closed on a quarterly basis. All these other modules would get closed on a monthly basis. We then would get into closing receivables, payables, job costs for any of you using the job cost module, and then finally we would close the general ledger module. Let's talk a little bit about what happens when we close modules, and I'll start with accounts payable here. When you're getting ready to close, you certainly want to make sure that all of your data entry that is related to the accounts payable module has been updated or posted. Those related modules would typically be purchase order, very likely job cost, work order, or production management, because those things can feed into payables. You would want to look at whatever reports that you need for month end or predominantly year end. Typically, we recommend you would want to print an AP aging report. That AP aging report is based on the invoice document date. Its sister report is the AP trial balance report. And this report is the one that we recommend to use to reconcile to the general ledger, because this report is based on the GL posting date, not necessarily the invoice document date. And that's, for those of you who are newer to Sage 100, it's a little funky until you get used to that, but knowing how Sage gets that data posted and the dates with which information hits the books or hits the vendor's records, it makes sense that the trial balance report is the one that we would use to reconcile to the GL. In an ideal world, however, the general ledger, the AP trial balance report, and the AP aging report would all match at the end of each period. But we know that sometimes some dates get a little messed up, or somebody tries to backdate something. We just have a good way to get to that and figure that stuff out. Another report that might be useful would be the check history report. And again, you can certainly run that. We have the ability to run these reports to our paperless office module, so we don't have to print all that paper. If you need help setting up your paperless office module, by all means, let us know. We would be glad to help you with that. When the payables module closes, we've got some dates that we set as far as how much history we're keeping, or how many days do we retain paid invoices. And as we close month by month, certain information will get summarized or purged or consolidated during especially the year-end processing. The vendor purchase analysis report, that's one that definitely feeds off the year-end close. The monthly purchase report, that one certainly gets updated each month as we close. Accounts payable analysis report, similar to the vendor purchase analysis, but a slightly different viewpoint. And then the check history report. I talked about the option for the number of months to retain check history. I want to pop over to the software for a moment and show you what those settings are that I'm talking about. So if I get into the accounts payable module and I go into the setup folder, every module will have a setup options, and this is where we can identify some base settings that we need. And I gotta get my screens to play nicely because too many windows. There we go. So as I look at some of my settings here, under the additional tab, AP has transitioned from the number of days to retain paid invoices now to the number of months to retain paid invoices. This has an effect on what you see in vendor maintenance or vendor inquiry on the invoices tab. Once we have passed this threshold and an invoice has been paid in full and it has a zero balance, those invoices drop out of the open invoice view, which is what is used by the vendor inquiry or the vendor maintenance to see that. It is still in history, and it is still in history for as long as we choose to maintain that. So this particular company that I'm working in only holds 2 years of vendor history. We can actually go up to 99 years. I do not plan to be around in 2121 to help you confirm that, but if you choose to go out that far, that is perfectly fine by me. We usually recommend the IRS minimums, which I think are in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 years of history. Just makes it a little easier to locate things. But also remember, if you've got a lot of volume and you're holding, 8, 10 years of history, it's going to slow things down ever so slightly. So there's a balance there that we would want to hold on to. So we've got our options. We've got some reports that get summarized, and anything that you need to print, I strongly recommend you get the copies of that before you do your period end processing. As I was mentioning, the number of days or months as version 2020 and higher has switched to, purges those invoices from the open file and the transaction history file. As a prior to 2020, it was a maximum of 999 days. In Sage 100 2020 and forward, it's actually 9,999 months. Again, I don't expect to be available for that. If you don't want to wait, if you're holding that history and you want to purge things sooner, there are utilities that will help facilitate that purge. Let's talk a little bit about printing 1099s. Can I get a real quick hand raise? Go to your control panels, and if you would pop hands, who is doing their own 1099s this year? Yeah, we have a fun crew that is going to be working on that. That is delightful. Just as a side note, if you need some assistance with that, please reach out. Let me know. I'd love to get you on my calendar for January, because we all know those things are due by the end of January. How do we do our 1099s? Well, first of all, we need to have the Atrix program, the Form 1099 e-filing and reporting program, installed on the workstation from which those documents will be prepared. You must have an active maintenance or support plan. You must use the red copies for the federal if you are mailing those into the government. The Atrix will offer an option to e-file, and with that, you don't have to worry about having pre-printed forms. Note that the 3-part NEC form that came out a couple of years ago, actually it came back a couple of years ago. The government has transitioned that to a 3-part form, where the 1099 miscellaneous, dividend, and interest forms are still the 2-part red form. Recipient copies can be printed on blank paper. Typically, we recommend the 4-part perforated paper. If you can have the 1099 instructions pre-printed on the back, that's delightful. If not, Atrix offers for you to print those instructions before you send those copies to the recipients. So the 1096, that summary form, if you're doing the different iterations of 1099s, that also requires the red pre-printed form if you are mailing those forms to the government rather than e-filing. I talked a little bit about the NEC form already, and as I had mentioned earlier, you have to be on at least Sage 100 2020 Service Pack or Product Update 5, 2021 Product Update 3, or Sage 100 2022, the base version will allow you to install the IRD. As a point of note, the service pack or the product update for 2022 is already up to product update 2. So we certainly want to keep an eye on those things because that does fix or enhance things that are in the software for us. If I have a couple of minutes before the break, I will go back through and I'll actually walk through the 1099s. I want to go ahead and cover as much material as I can here first. Let's talk a little bit about accounts receivable. Very similar to accounts payable. Before you do your closing, you want to make sure that all your data entry from AR module as well as any related modules is updated, posted, most specifically sales order and job costing. If you are processing statements and charging finance charges, you will want to go ahead and apply the finance charges. Print those customer statements. Again, paperless office gives us the ability to send those out via email. And if that's something you want to look into, let us know. We would be more than happy to help. Some of the reports that you would want to run as of the end of the fiscal year, or certainly as of the end of each period, very similar to the AP reports, the aged invoice report. That's the one that's based on the invoice dates. The AR trial balance report, that one is related to the general ledger posting date. And again, the ideal scenario is that the aged invoice report, the AR trial balance report, and the general ledger all tie out. And I apologize, I just noticed that a question popped up, and that's a really good one. Let me step back for a half a second here, because the question was raised, how do I find reports that can help us identify vendors for 1099s? Very quickly, when we look back at our vendors and we go into our setups here, we have the ability to identify what kind of a vendor, whether they're a business or an individual, what their default form is, what the default box number is, some of that information. If you have those set up, there is a report, I believe it's the vendor listing report, and David can correct me if I'm not right. Where I can look at 1099 payment history. So I could run this for 1099 vendors. So if they are already set up, I can identify who they are. But if they're not already set up, I would probably need to go back and look at payment history, check history reports. The typical rule of thumb for 1099 vendors is that they are a non-incorporated entity that is performing services for you. So that would be the non-employee compensation. If you pay rent, that requires a 1099 miscellaneous form. Your attorneys, regardless of whether or not they are incorporated, they get 1099s as well. So if you've got a cleaning service that comes in and they are incorporated, they don't need to get a 1099. But if it's a smaller group or just a single person who you are paying to clean the offices or something of that nature, they would be getting a 1099 if they meet the $600 threshold for the year. So that's a great question. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry it took me a minute to see that. So anyway, back to accounts receivable. We talked about the aged invoice report, the AR trial balance report, and having all of that jive with the general ledger. That is what I call nirvana, but we know that that doesn't always happen. So use your trial balance report to help reconcile to the general ledger. Some other reports very similar to the ones that we saw on the AP side. We would see a customer sales analysis report. We would see a sales analysis by salesperson report. We would see a monthly sales report. Typically anything that says monthly in it, as you close each month, that resets, and you can only run that report for the current open period. So keep that in mind. I've had a lot of questions over the years. Hey, I'm trying to run the sales report, but it won't let me change the date. And I ask them, is that the monthly such and such report? Well, yeah. And I explained that is why, because it is only focused on the current open period. So that's just more encouragement to keep your modules closed. Salesperson commission reports, receivables analysis reports, those kinds of things, they will get purged or consolidated as we go through the year-end processing. As in accounts payable, we have similar settings for the number of days or months to retain paid invoices. Again, if I have a closed invoice, if it's been paid in full, and I don't have to see it in my customer maintenance or inquiry after we elapse so many months closed after that invoice has been paid off. It can drop from the customer maintenance, customer inquiry views, but it will be in your history file for as long as you are holding history. So a lot of folks get pretty wrangled when they don't see it in the customer or the vendor, but I show them, use the invoice history inquiry and you can get back at that. Monthly cash receipts file gets purged out, and there's a concept called temporary customers. And those are customers that we can set up. We may not do continued business with them, but we want to have some substantial information, be able to process invoices for them at the end of the year. If that customer balance is a zero balance, they don't have any open invoices, those could potentially be purged from your customer list. So that kind of helps keep your list clean. And if we don't want to purge those temporary customers, there is a checkbox in the accounts receivable settings that will allow us to hold on to those temporary customers even though their invoices are paid by year end. I'm going to do a little segue here and talk about inventory. I know not everybody has inventory, but a significant number of you do. So as we are closing inventory, again, make sure that all of your data entry is updated or posted, especially in subsidiary modules such as sales order or purchase order. For those of you using FIFO or LIFO valuations for your inventory, I strongly encourage you to run that negative tier report. Figure out which cost layers have gone negative. We all know that negative inventory is not cool, but what happens is that we could look at an item and it might show us a zero quantity, but if we go look at cost details, we're going to see a negative cost tier and a positive cost tier, and those two should merge together, and the negative tier report and the negative tier adjustment register will do that for us. So if we're keeping up to date on that, we're keeping those negative cost layers out of play or minimized. That's good housekeeping from your inventory. If you do your physical counts this time of year, the first thing that we would want to consider is freezing the inventory. Excuse me. And if you need a worksheet, we can run that physical count worksheet. There's also a card count functionality that feeds into the physical count. Some clients have used the card counts where they have a piece of paper or an index card or what have you. They have those cards numbered. we can keep track that all of the cards got brought back in, and that way we know all the inventory got counted, and then all of that information can be pushed into the physical count entry, and then those counts can be updated and processed correctly. So make sure your date is posted. Run the tier reports. Again, that's through the period end folder in inventory. If you need to do your physical count, run that from the physical count section of inventory and get those counts updated, and then it's safe to go ahead and close the module for the month or for the year. The inventory valuation report. There is this report originally from my history. This has always been, and as of whatever moment in time I am printing, that is the valuation of my inventory right then and there. Ideally, you would probably want to grab that right around the last day of your fiscal year. That can be used to help you reconcile the inventory details with your general ledger. There is also an inventory valuation report by period, which does allow for us to look back at previous periods and see what our inventory values might have been. I've still been a little skeptical of that, although David can chime in on this one. I think Sage has made that report significantly better. So it is going to be a little bit more accurate in looking back at where my inventory was a month or 2 months or multiple months ago.
Yeah, they have made improvements to that, and I've got several clients now that are actually using that. So
cool. Another report that you would want to consider, and this actually comes out of the purchase order module, the purchases clearing report. As I have moved people from other software platforms into Sage 100, I would always get the question, well, what's this purchases clearing thing? And for those of you who are less familiar, the short answer is it's the interim liability account that gets used between the receipt of product and the receipt of invoice. Or perhaps if you get your invoice entered first and you haven't received your product, it might show a negative on that report because it's trying to resolve the fact that we want our quantity ordered on our PO to equal the quantity received to equal the quantity invoiced. That's what takes any given line of a PO off that purchases clearing report. And if we've got our GL set up accordingly, then we should have a balance in the GL account that we could reconcile back to the purchases clearing report and make sure that our data is up to speed. Let's talk a little bit about the general ledger. This is the last module that we would typically close, especially at year end. And we want to make sure that all the other modules have been posted and are closed. If you're using the recurring journals, we would go ahead and process those. That would go ahead and get those postings in. Any adjustments for your fiscal year, and I know, this time of year we're trying to get, everybody's tax returns done, and it might take a month or two for your accountants to get you your year-end adjustments. That's okay. The reason being, if you need to close the GL, once you close the GL, we cannot post back into that closed period. However, if you want to close the GL to keep people from accidentally backdating into the prior year, that's okay because we can reopen the GL and make those final year-end adjustments. For some of my folks that have come from BusinessWorks, once we closed a module, we couldn't reopen it. Well, Sage 100 does allow us the opportunity to reopen modules if we need to. Certainly not recommended, and one that I never recommend that you reopen is Payroll. I'm just going to say, please don't do that, period. But the other modules, yes, we have the ability to go ahead and reopen them. And really, the GL is the only one we would have to be really concerned about reopening. If you're using the budgeting functionality, we would want to be able to update the budget revisions, run the budget revision register if necessary. You absolutely want to make sure that your trial balance is in balance. If you're using allocations where we pool information into an account and then we redistribute it based on some pro rata type of distribution, the allocation journals can facilitate that. We want to get that stuff done before we do the closing. Some of the common reports, obviously these are just recommended, and you certainly can print any of the other ones that you would want or need. Certainly want to get a trial balance report. You certainly want to run your financial reports, balance sheet, income statement, statement of cash flows if you need that. And then if you want to run a general ledger detail report, I know sometimes accounting firms request something of that nature. All of these things can be printed into the paperless office functionality and then sent back out either via email or put it on a flash drive or something like that as a PDF. That will allow you the ability to get that data into the proper people's hands without having to kill a forest. What happens as we close the year end? Well, the biggest thing is that the net income or net loss, as the case may be, from the P gets closed into the retained earnings account. Depending on the number of years that you're retaining transaction history and summary history, beginning balances for the accounts will get recalculated. If you are doing budgeting, then the budgets will get calculated. And with that, I do have a question that was posed a few minutes ago, and I didn't get a chance to address it, but I would love to address it here. How can we tell per module what the last date of a monthly or a yearly close has occurred? And that one, you can go about it in a couple of different ways. You do have to work on it module by module. I'm going to have to switch to my non-headphones here. You guys still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my headphones were barking at me, telling me that they'd run out of juice. Because apparently I talk too much. Excuse me. So what we can do is module by module in the setup folder, we can go into the options for that particular module, and we can see what the current fiscal year and fiscal period is. That is the most definitive way to determine that. And even if you cannot get into the options in an editing mode, you can still view this. The other option is if you attempt to do the period end processing, it will tell you, hey, you are in such and such a period, and I will perform period end processing for said period, said year. So either way, you would have visibility as to what each module's current period is. People ask about closing, and I have come across a number of clients that have neglected to close on a regular basis, and so they might be a couple, 3, 4, 10 years unclosed. In Sage, when you do a closing, you do it 1 month at a time. You do it 1 module at a time. I have, and David can attest to this, if you're more than a few years or a couple of years out, I have not had any ill effect of simply changing to probably the last period of your latest fiscal year, doing a proper year-end closing, and then closing monthly up to whatever the current period is. So yes,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I'm throwing you
I've recommended that and done that a few times at clients. So, but yeah, I'd go to the last fiscal year that's actually closed, the last period of that year, and like you said, just do a year-end processing and then roll forward. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yep.
Oh, and we've got another brilliant question here. This is for folks who use job costing. What's the impact on jobs that are closed in the last month of the year, but then get reopened in the first period of the next year? What kind of impact is there on period end processing? And David, if you don't mind, I need to clear my throat. I'm gonna ask you to handle this one for me.
Yeah, you're probably getting a little tired of speaking up. Yeah, well, my first recommendation is don't close a job, or at least do not do the job closeout report on any jobs that you want to reopen. Although, I mean, Sage does let you reopen them. And as long as you're on version 2018 and newer, Sage handles that pretty well. Before version 2018, job cost was in the old framework and did not handle reopening jobs nearly as well. So I don't know. I hope that answers the question. When you reopen them, Sage will continue to put things in the correct month based on the date of that you update things. So I think you'll be fine.
Thank you, sir. All right, I would like
Absolutely.
to open it up for any other questions regarding the core modules, inventory, purchase, or purchase order, sales order, AR, AP, general ledger. We'll be happy to entertain them for you. You're welcome to type in your question or raise your hand, and if you raise your hand, we can open up your mic and let you speak. Got a question about period opening after closing. I'm not 100% sure what you mean. Are you talking about resetting the period? And Elizabeth, if I may, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so I can get a little more clarification on that. I think the question is, what do I do to reopen a period? And as I mentioned, we were going to close the May period. If I need to reopen this, I could certainly set it back to whatever period I need. That's just simply changing it in the options. You have to make sure that nobody is in that module or related modules, and AP and AR especially are impacted by pretty much everything else in the software. So you would want to do this when pretty much everybody else is out. So I just simply reopen the period, change the date here, save that change, and then if I needed to, I could reclose, because now the system thinks that I am back at a year end, and it would allow me to go ahead and do the reclose process. If you're reopening a significant number of periods, like you're going back a couple of years, which I hope nobody ever has to do, in the new business framework, in the newer versions, you could manually close it by going back to the current year, and I might recommend going back to the prior month from what your current period was and then do a proper close by doing the period end processing. But that is kind of one of the cooler things with the new business framework, that because of the buckets that Sage puts the data in, it is more based on the transaction date rather than on whatever the current open period was. So you are absolutely welcome to do that. And the next question, is there a temporary open only for the logged in user? No, it reopens it for everybody. So do be aware of that. That's a really, really excellent question. And I'm already getting some requests for 1099 assistance. You are welcome to chat it here in the questions because we keep a record of the questions, and I'll reach back out to you. You are welcome to email me or call me, and I will be able, or I'll put you on my calendar, and we'll be able to work through those as we go. Excellent. Do we have any other questions here regarding the core modules? All right, as a reminder, if any of you needs CPE, please contact Leah Peters. Just let her know that you attended either the first session or the second session or both sessions, and request the CPE credit. We'll get the credit letters out to you probably later this week or early next. And again, I am Mary Hildinger. There is my email address and phone number. You are welcome to reach out to me at any time. And for those of you who will be sticking around for the payroll, oh, wait a minute, I've got one more question. Brad?
Hi,
Okay,
Mary.
I got you, dear. Yes,
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Nice to hear your voice.
Thank you, sir.
Since for other people, we were on Business Works for 26 years. Your presentation was very clear as to month end and year end close. However, and maybe this can be accomplished off. I think it would have to be accomplished off this call. But for any accounts payable related transactions that get posted, for example, or accounts receivable that take place in January after the month is closed,
Mm-hmm.
just a little confused by that, meaning we have to apply credits to purchases, sales that happened in November, December. Or we're paying in the payable process, we're paying for services received in December but paid in the month of January.
Mm-hmm.
How can we back date those items?
That is a beautiful question, and a lot of it depends on your internal processes. I have seen some folks who have been very adamant where they go ahead and they close the period and they just record the invoice in the new year. I have seen other people who have then gone back and they will backdate, and they'll, if it's January 5th and I've received an invoice that was dated December 27th,
Yes.
I would still go ahead and post it in December if I want to recognize that expense, or if I want to give that customer a credit and backdate it into December. If I'm starting to look back multiple months, I probably wouldn't go back. This is just my personal opinion. I probably wouldn't go back months, but I would put it at the end of the fiscal year so it gets recognized in that fiscal year. But if you want to draw that hard and fast line in the sand and say, you know, if it comes in, I don't care, I'm going to date it for January 1st and move forward, that is absolutely your business decision.
Okay.
If you want to roll it back, there is no harm at all in putting it back into at least the end of your fiscal year.
And since the module's closed, it will allow me to do that?
It will allow you to do that as long as your general ledger is not closed for the fiscal year.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I think our situation, we don't close the GL until a couple months afterwards.
Exactly.
Is we process a lot of dated goods with returns, and we also tend to use the date of 12/31.
Yes, that's perfect.
Which is good for tracking purposes.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice talking to you.
Thank you, sir. You too. All right. I'll be around here if you want to at least chat me some questions. I'll be happy to address them. Let's take about 5 to 7 minutes. And for those of you that are coming back for the payroll, let's try to reconvene at about 5 after the hour. So 2:05 Eastern to 11:05 Pacific, something of that nature. And we'll be here to move on with the other half of the discussion today. Larry, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I'm sending you. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Hey, I was going to ask you to expand on the differences between the 1099 MISC, and the NEC when you come back. If that's yes, and you may have done that already, but
the short answer, Larry, is that the NEC, non-employee compensation form, that takes the place of anything that was previously reported in box 7 on the MISC form. So the 1099 miscellaneous form is no longer used for your non-employee compensation, but it's still used for rent, other income, your attorneys. There's a whole slew of boxes that are still intact on the MISC form, but the NEC form, non-employee compensation form, that is exclusively for those who previously reported box 7 on the miscellaneous form.
well, you said attorneys was MIC,
That is correct.
but then you mentioned something about custodial people.
Well, that would be an NEC form. That'd be a non-employee compensation.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you. So you'll be back in a little bit.
Yes, sir. About 5 minutes.
You've been getting along okay?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you. How about you all?
Good. Is it just you and me talking?
No, sir. Anybody else that's here can hear us. So.
Oh, I wanted to know what you were for Halloween this year, but you don't have to.
I was a darkened room.
A what?
A darkened room.
Okay.
I hid.
Okay. I'll see you back in a minute, dear.
Very good, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
By the way, in case anybody's listening, the IRD is due out on December 15th, so we're looking at a couple days yet.
Thanks, David. All right. Welcome back, everybody. For those of you who are sticking around for part 2, payroll year end. And again, I figure everybody's probably already well hooked up, but if you're having any issues with connections, please reach out to Leah Peters at area code 260-399-8649. I don't think anybody is new to this session, but just again, remember you can use the submit questions through the questions chat. We can do the raise hand like we've done for a couple of folks. And at the end of the payroll session, we'll open up time for questions regarding the payroll or anything else that comes up. As a reminder, my name is Mary Hildinger, and I am a systems consultant for DWD Technology Group. And hanging out with me here this afternoon is David Overholt. He's a project manager and a master developer of Sage 100 software. As a reminder, anybody who would like CPE credit, feel free to reach out to Leah. Her email address is here on the screen or is in your handout material. Just let her know that you would like the CPE for the payroll section of today's session. Some things, the welcome, we can certainly get through that fairly quickly because it's going to be a little repetitive from the earlier session. Talk about some important things like dates and what compatibility of different versions of the software. Talk about payroll and what happens during year-end processing. We'll talk about processing forms with Atrix, and we'll make sure that we're all very well aware of Payroll 2.x or Payroll 2.22 or 2.23. So let's talk a little bit again. Let's remind everybody of what versions are compatible. From a Sage 100 platform, the versions that are compatible or actually not obsoleted, let me rephrase that. So the versions that Sage has not yet obsoleted are version 2022, version 2021, and version 2020. Payroll, you'll notice the 2.20 under Payroll 2020, or under Sage 100 2020, Payroll 2.21 and 2.22. With the new business framework and with the new payroll functionality, they certainly release an updated version every year, but there are constantly the tax table updates that get pushed to the users. We would like to encourage that everybody, regardless of whether you're on a non-obsoleted version of Sage or not, get your payroll updated. And if you need some assistance with that, let us know. We will be more than happy to help you with that. Just because you might be running Sage 100 2018 or 2019 does not mean that you cannot get access to Payroll 2.23. But with some of the other things that are coming along over the next year, we strongly encourage you to get updated to a more current version. And you can reach out to David or to me, and we'll get you on our schedules. As we mentioned, the different release dates and when the end of support. Basically, a version comes out usually the first or second quarter of the year. And when that new version comes out, then 2 versions prior to the current version will become the obsoleted version. So as Sage 100 2023 comes out, 2020 will be the one that drops off as being a supported version. Excuse me. As I'd mentioned earlier, the tax updates, those are all maintained in the updates that get pushed to you. We don't have to download those anymore, so Sage will notify you that, hey, there's a version available. Do you want to go ahead and install it? I just strongly encourage you to install it when it is presented. As I've mentioned, Payroll 2018 or higher can utilize the new payroll framework. But in order to make sure that everything is updated, you get the proper tax tables and whatnots, you will want to make sure that you get Payroll 2.23 installed. If you are still on an older version of Sage, please get with your business partner or get with us if we are not your business, or if we are your business partner. Let's get you upgraded. It really, payroll processing is so much easier now with the new business framework, not to mention staying compliant. I do talk a little bit about the legacy 2017 and prior, and then of course our version 2.2x. It is recommended that you make a backup prior to closing the quarter. And unlike the other modules in Sage, payroll closes on the quarter. So the calendar quarter, not your fiscal year. And if those of you on fiscal years, just remember everything for payroll is calendar based. You can maintain however much history in the perpetual history if you've got that enabled. Now, in the legacy version, you would need to make sure that you get the payroll closed before processing checks dated in the next quarter. That is not quite as true with the new 2.2x framework. I still encourage you to make those backups and do the quarter closes on a timely basis. Back in the old days, I'm throwing back to the way back days, we were not able to get historical reports as far as the year end, the W-2s, the tax liability reports, those things. If you had closed your payroll for especially the year end, you were not able to get back to process those forms properly. ATRIX, or the federal and state e-filing and reporting as it's also known, that can refer to prior periods. However, once you get that download for the current year, which is going to start coming out pretty much any time now if it hasn't already, excuse me, once you get the new forms for the year, like a 941 form or perhaps the W-2s, you cannot regenerate those historical forms. So if we're within that first month, first few weeks of a new month of the quarter, you can still access those older forms. But once you've done the ATRIX update, I can't go back and process a 2020 Form 941 or a 2020 W-2. So keep that in mind. Excuse me. What happens during year-end processing? I will talk a little bit about 2018, prior to 2018. As I mentioned, all the quarter-to-date, year-to-date earnings, deductions, taxes get reset. Quarter-specific reports, I talked about the monthly reports in the core modules. There are quarter-specific reports in payroll. They'll only show you the quarterly activity for the current quarter. If you purged out your check history file, if you don't have the setting to maintain perpetual history, the check history file gets purged out. You could have purged that manually. Terminated employees would be removed based on the history of maintaining those terminated employees. And then, of course, you update into the new quarter and the year. For what I would say the majority of us, if not all of us, are currently running on the new business framework, records from history will be held for at least 4 years. Employee direct deposit year to date gets set back to 0. Terminated employees will stick around for a minimum of 2 years, and then after that 2 years has elapsed and those employees are still in a terminated status, they will start to be removed from your employee listing. If you're using calendar-based reset rules to reset time off, or any of the 3 time off functions that you can set up, those settings will get zeroed back out. And then, of course, we update into the new quarter and the new fiscal year, calendar year. We're going to talk a little bit about ATRIX. If you want to process your forms via Atrix, you must be on version 2018 or higher. We strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you get upgraded even further so that you're in the 2020 series of Sage 100. Just like for the accounts payable, you would have to have the federal and state e-filing and reporting function installed. And for those of you who may not be familiar, that is the same program that is used for the accounts payable 1099s. So if you install it, it's there if you're going to do payroll or if you're going to do 1099s or if you're going to do both. And in order to get that installed and get the proper updates, you must be current on your Sage support plan. What forms can we do? We can certainly do our federal forms. We can do the Form 940, which is your federal unemployment summarization. You can do your Form 941. You can do your W-2s. You can do your state forms. And we can do all of this without pre-printed forms. So even the W-2s, we can run those on plain paper now. Or if you want to pay an additional fee, you can certainly e-file those through Atrix. I do have a question, which is a really good question. Payroll 2.2x to Payroll 2.23 updates. Yes, there will be a conversion of the data. So when you get when that update gets installed, someone will need to be responsible for running the conversion utility from company maintenance. And the recommendation is do a backup before you install that, because if anything happens, if anything goes wrong with the installation, if anything goes wrong with the conversion, you really would like to have a copy of the company that you can retrieve virtually immediately in order to reprocess. So thank you for that reminder. That's a very, very good point. As I mentioned, we can certainly do state tax forms. The exact forms would vary by the state you are in. I can speak to Indiana because that's what I am used to. The Indiana unemployment form, the UC1 5A, that is actually required to be e-filed, or you have to file it on the Indiana Department of Workforce Development website. The withholding forms, I think those can be e-filed. The WH3 is the annual summary that gets processed with the W-2s and the W-3. So the W-2, W-3 is the federal summary form. The WH3 is the W-2's state summary form. And for those that do not need to be e-filed, you can use plain paper. Ideally, for the employees, you use the 4-part perforated with the instructions either printed on the back, or you need to send instructions with the W-2s. Again, I can speak to Indiana. If you have 25 or more W-2s, you must e-file. So I know the federal threshold, I think, is in the neighborhood of 250 employees. But if you've got at least 25 W-2s that you'll be filing, not necessarily who are currently working for you, but that many returns, you will need to e-file them. I cannot speak to the other states. So check with your local accountants to ensure that you are filing properly. I have not seen the update yet for Atrix, although just be aware they are going to come hard and heavy for the next probably 5 weeks. So you might get in, you might start working on something, you'll get prompted for an update. You could come in as early as the same day and get prompted for another Atrix update. Do not be surprised by that. They will be coming down hard and furious. Just update for us, please. All of your forms will get updated. All of the selections will get updated. And then Atrix program fixes get delivered through their automatic updates. So the next few slides are going to basically talk about the process. I'm actually going to go into the process here in Sage and walk through what happens when we get to payroll. I have a good sneaking suspicion that I am going to get prompted for the Atrix update. So I get into my payroll year, period end, excuse me, and I run the federal and state tax reporting function. And I got to get to a company that has been converted because apparently I've done something to this one. Let's try that one. Oh, fine. This is the conversion that was just being referred to. I think I did drop on 2.23 and it got cranky at me. Let's see if it's going to let me do this now. This could get embarrassing. Oh, yay. Hold that thought. New version. I did some maintenance to my computer over the weekend, so it might be mad at me for that. And if I can't walk through this physically, I will walk you through it on the slides. Here we go. Let's go see what that looks like. All right, I did not get prompted for the Atrix update. Doggone it.
I was just going to ask you if you wanted me to like sing a song or something.
Say again, please, David.
So I was wondering if maybe you wanted me to sing a little song while we were waiting.
Please do.
Trust me, nobody wants that. Sorry.
That's quite all right. So
was hoping I could help you, but I didn't know how I could help other than maybe that.
Nope, you're all good. Just rolling with it. So if you get in and you are maybe using Atrix for the first time, it might require you to authenticate, which this is part of the cloud-based authentication. So it will ask you to validate, and then you might get this prompt for the automatic update, or you can manually download the update, or you can continue to expired. I do not suggest doing that. Pretty much always pick the automatic update. And once you do the automatic update, then what happens is that we get greeted with the screen for the federal and state tax reporting. And we can run either federal reports, we can run our state reports, or if we have history reports, historical reports that we want to go into, we can go to the existing reports. So if I go to pick my federal, I can look for my forms, and I can see that I've got some older forms out here. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump into my W-2s. And I can go ahead and specify the year for which I'm going to run, and it will default you to the year that your payroll period currently is. So if you're doing this before you close payroll, then it should be in 2022 quarter 4. If you've already closed into January so that you can start processing payroll for 2023, make sure you set this back to 2020 quarter 4. And then you just go ahead and proceed. And it's yelling at me because I don't have a good FEIN. So let me fix that really fast. I noticed that the other day when I was doing another demo. There we go. Let's see where I am here. I don't remember where my sample data is. Dang it. David, can you start singing for me, please, brother?
Well, should it be Christmas tunes or? Trust me, you don't want that to happen.
Let's try something here. There we go. Oh, you are so angry. Why are you angry? Well,
you don't have a form name in there. Does that matter?
Oh, you know, that might have helped. Oh, and I got the stinking FEIN again.
I was going to say.
My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. This normally doesn't throw me for such a loop, but today is my day. Ha! Ta-da! There's my automatic update.
Yay. Demo data.
Yeah, of course,
that's the culprit, really.
It is. And just however many versions of it and whatnots. When you get the prompt for the update, back in the day, you used to be able to pick and choose what you wanted to update. You don't get that option anymore. You just pretty much say next. Let it update everything, even though some of those forms may or may not be applicable to your organization. And you may notice some 1099 forms that get updated. You may notice if you're doing these updates on the 1099 side, you're going to see a lot of the payroll forms get updated. Because Atrix is all consolidated in one program, it's going to update everything. So I don't know if you just saw the 1099s flash by. And the proverbial watching paint dry. But it is better to have all of the updates than to not pick what you needed, especially if you do have multiple states that your employees are in. (940) forms, 941 forms, W-2 forms. And again, because I have not updated this for so long, this is why this update is taking a little bit longer. If you get hit with those updates frequently over the next month or so, they will go more quickly. So do not be distressed by this. This just had some catching up to do in order for me to get as current as I should have been. Somebody who has just had Atrix installed on their workstation for the first time will go through a longer update process than somebody that has already had it and has been updated, because it's just got to catch things up. And just as a side note or a reminder, Sage will check to make sure that your payroll subscription is up to date. And for those of you who are familiar with the process, your core modules have one maintenance subscription. Your payroll has a separate maintenance subscription. So if you're wondering why you pay Sage twice, one of them is can be for the payroll, and the other one is for the core modules. And you want to make sure that those are current. This will also process your 1095 forms. So if you need to do ACA reporting, this has the ability to support that. I have helped a number of folks over the last few years with the 1095s, 1094. Again, contact me if you need some help with that again this year, and I will be happy to get you on my schedule. Atrix full service processing. If you don't want to print or send out your W-2s, you can pay Atrix a fee and they will do the e-filing for your state and state jurisdictions and the federal. They will also either email the W-2s to your employees if you've got proper email addresses for everybody, or they will go ahead and print and mail them to your employees for you. Once the update is complete, then Sage/Atrix will walk you into its wizard, which basically allows you to check your totals, make any changes that you might need. Sometimes a social security number is not right, or sometimes an address is not right. Because it is pulling from the employee information, you want to make sure that that information is correct before you go into the forms. Certainly make sure that you have social security numbers or taxpayer ID numbers for all of your employees. Atrix can call out invalid social numbers. Based on your deductions settings, it can also print information for your IRAs, your 401ks, and I guess I should not have updated my system over the weekend. Let's see why this is so angry at me. All right, I knew I should have tested this first, and I apologize that I didn't. Should not get the updates, that's a good thing. But it is being very cranky. Yep, it's being very cranky at me. Well, dang it. I'm going to jump back over, back to the slides. I apologize I couldn't show you more of Atrix, but I can certainly walk you through it in your own systems if you need help. There have been times where getting the Atrix updates either to download or to install, there have been errors that have cropped up. The most common issue is related to not having certain sites identified in the trusted websites in the internet options. There is a listing here of those things which need to be allowed. Sometimes there's a firewall setting. Sometimes companies have much stricter hold on what can get downloaded. If you are running into issues, we might need to work with your IT people and make sure that we get these things allowed so that those updates can come through. In a pinch, we can always go out to the Atrix site and we can manually download the Sage Mass update. And it will, it'll download it, put it on your local workstation, and then you can run it from there. Again, we would want to run that as an administrator. You can do that right-click run as admin, or if you need to have your IT available so that they can put in appropriate credentials. And it will do basically the same update that I just walked through on my own system. And when you go back into the federal and state e-filing and it prompts you for the automatic update again, just go ahead and do it. But because it will recognize that that has already been installed, it will move through that virtually immediately. As an FYI, make use of the customer portal. For those of you who are identified as authorized contacts with Sage, first of all, if you're not an authorized contact, let us know. We can help you with the form that you need to send in to Sage so that you can become an authorized contact. Utilize that customer portal. It has access to the knowledge base, which is the same knowledge base that DWD uses. It's the same knowledge base that Sage Tech Support uses. You can get product information. You can find your downloads out there. If you want to do these updates yourself, you can go get those downloads and go ahead and get them installed properly. I love the knowledge base for the fact that, you know, I can type in a phrase and I generally can find the issue related to the phrase that I've typed in. And it gives you all of those same things, as, you know, like the one here about, you know, why can't I update Atrix? I pulled this right off the knowledge base. So this is an article that's in Sage's knowledge base. A little bit about Payroll 2.x. For those of you, let me get a show of hands. Is anybody still on Sage 100 2017 or earlier? Thank the Lord. Well, then I don't really have to go over much here on this. Just realize that the data entry is a lot cleaner. We've got more security based on departments. We can customize the tax profiles. So when we used to have to try to handle multiple local jurisdictions, I know my friends in Ohio have, you know, 60 million different local jurisdictions for which they might have to withhold tax. It's so much easier now to manage all of that. And then, of course, all the updates get pushed to you rather than you needing to download that. Side notes. Pardon? And?
I don't know. Reversing checks, isn't that
Oh, yes.
new?
Yes, it
That
is.
should be on your slide.
I know, because I didn't think about that.
People may have upgraded and not realized that now it's so much easier to reverse a payroll check than it used to be.
Absolutely. David brings up a brilliant point here. If you've got your perpetual history turned on, especially while you're in a current year, and again, my demo data, I can't guarantee what's going to show up here, but if I need to reverse a check in payroll data entry, I don't have to manually figure out everything. I know that. And I know I'm using a crazy date, but that was just what came to mind. If I go ahead and jump in, I have the ability to pull up an employee, and there's a button here. Quickly up here, sorry. I can pull up my employee, and if I have access to the history, this little blue reversing arrow will become enabled. And what this allows for me to do is to click on that, and I can pick the check number that I need to reverse, and Sage will enter everything appropriately for a proper reversal. Now, it will not do the negative dollars in a direct deposit. You still have to do that manually through your bank. But as far as picking up the taxes, picking up all the deductions, not having to remember what to type in, where to type in what negative, Sage will do all of that for us. So that is definitely a feature. And I think that came out around 2020, if I'm not mistaken. So that would have been Payroll 2.20. Definitely easier with which to deal. All right. I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up for questions. Feel free to type them into the questions, raise your hand. We can unmute your mic and allow you to chat. No questions? Again, if you need CPE for this afternoon's session, please reach out to Leah Peters. Let her know you were at the Sage 100 year-end webinar. Let her know if you attended one or the other or both of the sessions, and ask for CPE credit. We'll get those letters out to you, like I said, later this week or early next. And if you have questions, if you need assistance with your year-end form processing, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. There's my email and my phone numbers. I would be more than happy to get you on my calendar and assist you with your year-end processing. I want to thank you all for being here. David, thank you for assisting here this afternoon.
Absolutely.
And I want to wish everyone a very happy holiday. Let us know if there's anything that DWD can do to assist you in your endeavors.
Great. Thank you, Mary.
Ooh, I got a great question here about checks from a couple, 3 years ago. Are they payroll checks? I would not reverse those. I would not reverse payroll checks. Typically out of the quarter, definitely not out of the year. What I would recommend doing is a dummy cash receipt that is of the same net amount as the pay. Those two things can then be cleared out. And if you need to reissue, you could issue it as an AP check so that the funds go out appropriately. But I would not reverse a check really out of the current quarter.
Because you've already filed your 941s and such, is that?
That's part of it. The 941 forms have already been filed. The W-2s have already been filed. Trying to think here.
But mainly for those reasons.
Mainly for that, yes, and because of the tax calculations. That's an awesome question. Thank you.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Well, we will get the recording out to everybody probably later this week, first part of next week, so you can revisit this at your convenience. You've got the handouts. You can download them from the handouts tab on your control panel. And again, use those as a point of reference. Thank you, folks, for all being here today. And let us know if there's anything we can do. Hope everybody has a great day.